What happens to a body in zero gravity? What does the Earth look like from space? And what do astronauts dream about when they look at our planet from orbit? Today, ordinary people will have a unique chance to ask these questions directly to those who have been in space. First, the legendary Chris Hadfield, and after him, Buzz Aldrin himself. Two astronauts, two views of space, and answers that will surprise you. Get ready to hear the answers firsthand, directly from those who have seen space with their own eyes. I am Colonel Chris Hadfield, retired astronaut. I am Commander Chris Hadfield, recently back from 5 months on the space station. Since landing in Kazakhstan, I've been in Russia, across the US and Canada doing medical tests, debriefing, meeting people, talking about spaceflight, and signing books. I'm the author of a new book called An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. Life after 3 spaceflights and 21 years in the astronaut corps is turning out to be busy and interesting. I hope to share it with you as best I can. 2 questions. 1. How much damage did your body have when you came back to Earth? Could you walk? Did you find yourself nauseous, etc.? 2. Where do you see manned spaceflight going in the future? Do you think we could ever have a moon base or a Mars base or even make it out of the solar system? Thanks, and I want to thank you and your mustache for being so awesome. Right at landing, I felt dizzy, heavy, and then nauseous. After working out 2 hours per day on ISS, I was plenty strong, just disoriented. The inner ear takes time to recalibrate, as does blood pressure. Within 12 hours, I could walk fine, though with a bit of staggering. I see human spaceflight moving ever outward from Earth. The logical sequence is Earth orbit, the Moon, asteroids, Mars. We have so much to learn/invent at each step, and there's no rush. It needs to be both driven and paced by technology, and drawn by science, discovery, and then business. Have you had any close calls accidents while in orbit? I was blinded by contamination in my spacesuit during my first spacewalk. It was the anti-fog used on my visor. Took about 30 minutes for my eyes to tear enough to dilute it so that I could see again. Without gravity, tears don't fall, so they had to evaporate. No way to rub your eyes inside the helmet. That sounds like a terrible situation. What happens if you sneeze in the helmet? When we have to sneeze in our spacesuit, we lean our heads forward and sneeze into our chest to keep it from splattering on the visor. Still messy, but the best compromise. Clean it up when you de-suit. Hi, Colonel Chris. Really important question. Do you fart more or less in space? More, because it's impossible to burp when weightless. The gas, liquid, and solid in your stomach all mix together. As an experiment, try standing on your head and burping. I have some questions for you. What is your favorite thing about being an astronaut? And also, what was the most difficult thing that you had to overcome in the process of becoming an astronaut? Favorite thing? The people. Choose a career that surrounds you with people who have skills you do not. You'll get better just by being there, learning by osmosis. Most difficult thing? Remembering all the details taught over many years, to have them at front of brain on ISS when needed. Thank you so much, Chris, for your incredible answers and for sharing your unique experience. But this is not the end of our cosmic journey. Now is the time to hear the stories and thoughts of another cosmonautics legend, Buzz Aldrin, the second man to set foot on the moon. Sit back, there are still many exciting revelations ahead. I am Buzz Aldrin, engineer, American astronaut, and the second person to walk on the moon during the Apollo 11 moon landing. AMA. I am hoping to be designated a lunar ambassador, along with all the 24 living or deceased crews who have reached the moon. In the meantime, I like to be known as a global space statesman. This July 20th is the 45th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. Everywhere in the world that I visit, people tell me stories of where they were the day that Neil Armstrong and I walked on the moon. Ask me anything. How do you feel about people who claim you faked the moon landing? Can you describe how the moon felt to you? Was it an adrenaline rush when your feet hit the surface? Was it soft or hard? Could you feel temperature through the suit at all? Funniest moment during the mission to the moon and back? I personally don't waste very much of my time on what is so obvious to a really thinking person. Of all the evidence, we talked about Carl Sagan recently, who made a very prophetic observation. He said that extraordinary observations require extraordinary evidence to make them believable. There is not extraordinary evidence of, as far as I know, all the claims that have been made that we did not go to the moon. Graphs from lunar reconnaissance orbiter satellites going around the moon that clearly show all of the experiments that we described when we came back from the moon, and they are evidence that we were there telling the truth. You can even see a trail of Neil Armstrong's trek, not footprints really, but the stirred up dust in walking or jogging behind him. To see the west crater that we had flown over, that Neil was concerned about landing close to that, and he took photos of that, and then he went back to the spacecraft. I was back inside the spacecraft at this time, but looking at the photos of lunar reconnaissance orbiters, you can clearly see the evidence of Neil's trek. And he took photographs, and all the signs are still there. Our flag in Apollo 11 was, without the doubt, the best-looking flag that was stuck on the moon. But it was close to the spacecraft, so when we lifted off, Neil observed that the rocket exhaust caused the flag to strike the ground, to fall over. And by this time, I'm sure the radiation in space has deteriorated every piece of cloth on the flags, whether they are flying on the surface or standing up. We perhaps in the future will have very accurate rovers that can approach the different landing sites and perhaps make available to people back on Earth the ability to control a video scan, get out elevations, with floodlights to illuminate during the 14 days of darkness. I believe this will be very inspiring to people back here on Earth. If we have the funds to do that, it would be great to do that. The spacesuit had a soft interior to the shoes. And when the boots got put over the shoes, there is much cushioning effect, and the light weight due to the reduced gravity and the thickness of the dust made it difficult to sense the feel of the surface. It was so remarkable the way the boot prints were left, with such strong definition of the soil underneath, like moist talcum powder, I guess. It keeps its shape, so I photographed before and after, pictures of the surface. And then I thought that looked a little lonely, so I put another boot print down and moved my foot a little bit so you could see my foot and the boot print. I have since been told by a comic, by a humorist, what humor really is. But just as we were leaving the moon, I had given some thought to this, and I was able to create 2 achievements of humor in 1 sentence. When Mission Control said to us, as we were about to leave, "Tranquility Base, you are cleared for liftoff," I responded by saying to them, "Roger, Houston, we are number 1 on the runway." There wasn't anybody else for us to be 2, 3, 4 to, but there wasn't any runway up there either. It's a phrase most pilots hear many times. "Roger Tower, acknowledge we are number 3 for takeoff on the runway." Because there are people waiting before us in an airplane to start takeoff. Pilots always get it. We are not going to roll ahead with increasing speed. We were going to lift off straight up the way we left the Earth. Canadian astronaut Colonel Chris Hadfield has said that being an astronaut and a test/fighter pilot requires you to constantly train in every worst-case scenario so that you are prepared for everything. He eloquently said, "As a pilot, you are always thinking, what's the next thing that's going to kill me?" This has influenced his life and his mindset in very small things on his everyday life, like traffic, preparing what to say to famous people, thinking what to do if there's a fire in the building, etc. Have you had this experience? Is there anything you learned from being an astronaut, 8 hours of EVA, and a fighter pilot that you applied to your everyday routine, or maybe changed your perspective or attitude towards life? Yes, I realize that unfortunate things may occur anytime to anyone, just as disastrous events may occur to pilots, to combat pilots, or to those in space. To appropriately respond to an emergency requires a very clear mind, to coolly analyze what the observations are and how to fix it. Fear and worry are emotions that cloud the mind from being able to think clearly, to remember what the procedures are to deal with that emergency. Dwelling on an engine failure for a pilot as he rolls down the runway is not what he should be thinking about. It's obtaining a smooth liftoff, but in the back of his mind he knows exactly what to do, or pretty much. And in many cases, if he's alone in the fighter aircraft, he has to leave that aircraft in an ejection seat in a big hurry. When I am getting ready to cross a street, I look both ways before crossing. My bones, my muscles are not what they used to be, so I am careful when I go up and down stairs, because I've heard stories of older people falling and having very disabling injuries. I have enough things that begin to go a little bit wrong as I get a little bit older. I'd just as soon not have major catastrophes to have to deal with, so I very carefully move around, avoiding dangerous situations. Mr. Aldrin, I've always been curious what it would be like to experience re-entry. What kind of emotions and thoughts did you experience when falling back to the Earth? I had 2 re-entries, one in 1966 and one in 1969. In 1966, it was the last re-entry in the 2-person Kennedy program, so I held a camera up against the window to film the flames from the heat shield that was behind us, but foremost in the spacecraft. And the flames were going backwards, away from us, in the front, and I was holding the camera and taking photographs. The G-forces increased, and I wasn't able to continue to hold the camera against the window, so I had to lay it back against my chest, but still continued to photograph the re-entry until there was no more unusual visual effects of the energy in the atmosphere. And it was very comforting to understand that the people in Houston, the controllers, had very high confidence that we were on the right path. And the right path means that as you enter the atmosphere, the lift of the spacecraft is down to be able to capture the trajectory from the moon, and once that is assured that the spacecraft won't skip out, we now roll the spacecraft so the lift vector is up. It's predicted by the computer as basically a target, moving it up to where it now was exactly where we wanted it to be. And then we could roll the spacecraft so that it no longer had increasing lift in any direction, but had 0 lift, effectively, and we would guide it down to a point where we could then deploy automatically a device that would slow us down enough that then at 10,000 feet, the 3 parachutes would come out. A little lower, the pressure of the atmosphere outside was greater than inside, and we could smell the salt air, and it was very encouraging to return to Earth. We didn't jettison the parachutes soon enough, so the impact on the water moved my fingers away from the circuit breakers, which had to be pushed in before Mike Collins, throwing the switch to jettison the parachutes, could take place. So the parachutes pulled us over and allowed the spacecraft to float upside down rather than right side up. Now the engineers were very surprised in the early testing of the spacecraft in water to discover that it would float upside down as well as right side up. So they devised a system of inflating big balloons that would then turn the spacecraft right side up. We had to do that. How did you guys decide who would walk on the moon first? Was it always going to be Neil from the beginning? Or was there some rock, paper, scissors matches to decide? I felt that there was an obligation on my part to put forth the reasons why a commander who had been burdened down with an enormous amount of responsibility and training for activities, and because of that, in all previous missions, if someone, a crew member, was to spacewalk, it was always the junior person, not the space commander, who would stay inside. We knew this would be different because 2 people would be going out. There was a group at NASA who felt the junior person, me, should go out first. But many people felt the great symbology of the commander from past expeditions or arrivals at a destination. The decision that was made was absolutely correct as far as who went out first, symbolically. However, who was in charge of the what happened after both people are outside, I believe could have been done differently. I was not the commander. I was a junior person. So once both were outside, I followed my leader, because we, NASA, had not put together detailed jobs of people outside. I believe it could have been improved, but it was very successful for what it was. And the decision wasn't up to me or Neil. It was up to people much higher up in NASA. Mr. Aldrin, what do you consider your biggest accomplishment that's totally unrelated to space? I was very close to the top of my class at West Point, and I continued to expand my understanding of the world around me and the human evolutions here on Earth. The achievements, perhaps to other people, are impressive when I tell them that not only have I been to the North Pole, I haven't been to the South Pole yet, but I have been to the Titanic in a little yellow French submarine. It took an hour and a half just to sink down in the ocean about 2 miles deep, to look out the thick glass window and see the Titanic. The visibility was such that we could see the bow. It became very famous in the movie thanks to James Cameron. But the visibility was not so good that you could actually see the bottom of the ocean that the Titanic was resting on. So it was an eerie sight of a ship festooned with rusting metal, like gingerbread, floating out the window in the ocean. Do the pictures of space do any justice to the real thing? Yes, they do. They recall, for me, the actual experience of myself in space. Not by words, not by print, but visual reminders. It brings back a very in-depth appreciation. They can be used very well for communicating in speeches, talks, and more to other people who can actually see what I saw and what the camera saw.